Well, what I wanted to do today with you, it's an exercise that I came across about things that we should do, but this is from the teacher training. So the things we should do and shouldn't do, and I want to discuss them with you. Your
Okay,
opinion, your experience.
all
Okay,
right. That
fantastic.
will be
Okay,
nice.
good. So let me just open it. Okay. Now, you have to decide if they are do's or don'ts.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one, what do you think? Do or don't?
Um, Allow pair work, group work before open class feedback, I guess the word
Mhm.
is
Oh,
feedback.
sorry. You can move the camera. You know, if you click on on the picture, you
Right.
can and hold. You can move it around.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Hmm. Now I know how it works.
Yes.
Um, so should we allow pair work, group work before open class feedback?
So, what do you understand by open class feedback?
Um, I do understand that feedback is like reaction from your students,
Mm-hmm.
their impressions, their thoughts to get feedback from
Mm-hmm.
the students after doing an exercise, for example,
Mm-hmm.
like after reading a text to discuss, to open for discussion
Mm-hmm.
and invite questions and
Good.
mm,
So, I think that the contrast is, should you do pair work or group work before you have a conversation with the whole class about the exercises? So do you think it's important they practice in pairs or in groups before
uh,
you start asking the questions to the whole class?
to give this feedback to each other or within small groups
Well,
or
yes, I would say, for example, if you have an exercise and you're teaching, say, a tense, present perfect. So do you think that you should do the exercise individually and then have feedback to the class? Or do you think they should practice in pairs or in groups before you correct the exercise altogether?
Well, I think it would be nice if they could work in groups or in pairs, um, and then just to compare
Mm-hmm.
all together.
Mm-hmm.
So only if they do not like working in groups and pairs, like
Right.
sometimes there are groups where students are on their own. They do not want to cooperate. They like I have this group
Mm-hmm.
this year, unfortunately, and it is not very comfortable to work in this group because students like they don't have this spirit of teamwork.
Okay.
Like
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
so they are on their own, like individual, and sometimes it's a problem to make a pair. Would you like to be in a group with these students? No, no. So
And do they know each other already?
they do, but I don't think that within only within groups when they study, but I don't think they cooperate a lot when they are outside uh,
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm.
university. I mean,
Yes, 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 yes. I understand. No, I was thinking maybe do an icebreaker. You know, an activity where they ask each other questions about themselves. Um,
might be, might
just to
be.
make them a bit more comfortable, like find
Right.
someone who, that.
Mm-hmm. Right. I know this table. Like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
mhm.
So
So
that,
I think that will be not. That will be a good idea.
but no. So you probably say yes. Ideally,
Mhm.
they should be allowed pair work and group work before open class feedback, but not always possible with some groups, as you said. Okay. No, number two.
Monitor every pair work, group work, moving around room. I think that's a good idea as well,
Mm-hmm.
because like today we were playing a game, a Maze of Terror, and it was
Oh,
based on uh, revising models of probability in the past.
wow. Good
And
one. Mm-hmm.
that's a very difficult topic. And I found a game, and it was a set of cards, and they were to move through this maze. So I divided them into two groups.
Mm-hmm.
There were not so many students, so ideally three groups,
Okay.
but
Uh-huh.
there were only two of them. I tried to listen um, to their discussions while they were going through this maze, because there was a situation on the card with the word why, and they needed to make deductions.
Oh, good one.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
like might have gone or must have gone, something like that. So, and I was trying to correct them or just to help with correct tense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important, and it helps student.
Absolutely. One thing I like to do when the students are a little bit uncomfortable with being singled out is I listen and I take notes, and then at the end of the exercise I say, I heard someone say blah blah blah, why do you think this is maybe not good? Okay. So you could do it there and then at that point when they're making the mistake, or you could make a note and just, I heard someone say
Right.
he might gone.
Hmm.
Why?
That,
What? Hmm.
that's a good idea. I was not taking notes, but
Yeah, it's another option. Yes,
mhm,
it depends on the students, but sometimes they're a little bit intimidated if you correct them. So you can also do
right.
that. And
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 become confused when you're writing something down.
yes, uh-huh. And this way you can also get them to tell you why it's wrong. So if you write it on the board, you can say,
Mhm.
why do you think I think he might gone? Why do you think this is wrong? Can you tell me what the mistake is?
Right.
Yes, it's another option as well.
Hmm. So it makes them think, not just go to another point. Like,
Exactly, exactly. And actually understand, not just listen to you and say, okay, you're right and I'm wrong,
hmm.
So they're actually understanding. Okay. Now the next one is an interesting one. Ask the group a question, then nominate.
And, nominate to say the name of the student.
Yes, so you would nominate someone in the group.
To
To,
answer this question.
Mhm.
I think that's a good idea,
Okay.
because I do this with my students. Like, I tell them, ask a question, but don't say the name of the student,
Uh-huh.
and only after asking the question, then say who is going to answer it.
Oh, that's good. That's a good idea. So then they have to listen to the question because they don't know.
Right, all of them need to
Mm.
listen and be very attentive. Not
Mhm.
like, Sasha, could you tell me?
Yeah,
And only Sasha
yeah,
is listening. All the
that's
other students
very,
doing their things.
that's a really good idea. I like that idea a lot. I think what they mean here is you have to be careful that if you have the groups and you're asking one group a question, for example, what is the past of can? Um, you shouldn't say what is the past of can group A and then Sasha, because then you're not really asking the group.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But don't think you would do that, but I think the idea is if you're asking the group a question, it's for the group, not just for one person in the group.
I see.
But your idea is very good. I like your idea. So everybody has to listen. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 4.
Get students figuring out language rules for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Get students figuring out language rules for themselves. Um, and what is meant by language rules? Like,
Right. So it would be the same as grammar rules.
so you give the examples, and then they try to figure out the rule. What is the rule
Exactly.
of? Mhm. Mm, I think that's not bad as well.
Mhm.
Like it might depend on the topic, on the grammar topic that you are explaining and discussing with your students. Like um, when introducing present simple, you may write down some situations, sentences with this tense, and try to figure out when do we use this tense, and ask students to do this, and make points like for habitual actions, for example, for everyday situations, routines, and
Exactly, very good. So you could do this with auxiliaries. For example, if you're teaching a tense and you write sentences with that tense, what's the auxiliary verb that you keep seeing? Okay, so
mhm,
that's very good. So it could be for the context, mm,
mhm,
when we use it, or it could be for the form as well.
right.
So it's more for them, it's more challenging, more interesting as well. Okay.
Mhm,
And I think you do this as well at the beginning of your lessons with your quotes. You know, you like to get them thinking about
mhm,
different things. So it's the
yeah.
same principle, but for language rules. So it's more student-centered.
Mhm,
Now,
okay.
number 5 is a little bit controversial.
Ask students what words mean.
Mhm.
Mm, Ask students what words mean. Mm,
So for
Is it
example,
about the, so,
go on.
is it about the situation when students do not know the name of a word, like they come across an unknown word, and you do not give them just this word in Russian, let's say, but you explain the meaning, you give the definition of the word, or
Yeah, well, it would be, it's sometimes there are some teachers that might come into the classroom and write a word on the board, for example, I don't know, usually.
Mhm,
And they say, what does usually mean? Okay, so if a student hasn't seen usually very often,
mhm.
what is the most common answer they will say?
I don't know.
I don't know. So it's not very productive. Okay, but there is another way similar to number 4. If you give words in context. So in your case, for example, instead of translating to Russian immediately, you could give a sentence with a word.
Mhm,
So they have a context. So a good example, if you think about the word draw.
mhm,
So in the context of a game, it would be the result. But in the context of an art class, it would be the verb to draw.
mhm.
So
Correct. Right.
you see, so with the right context, often students can get the meaning of the word.
Right.
Okay,
So
but
that's also a good idea, I think.
so maybe not to ask them directly what does it mean or translate, but try and
But
say, yeah.
right, to provide the context, and then it will be easier for them just to get the meaning of the words. Right.
Yes, so I often do that. So we'll be doing an exercise and the student maybe asks me, what does this word mean? And I'll give them an example of a sentence using that word and
Mhm.
kind of get the meaning from them.
And what about a synonyms, like a synonymous
Yes,
expression, for
that's
example?
good. Absolutely. Synonyms are good as well. It's just bearing in mind with number 5 that more often than not, when you ask directly, what does it mean? They will say, I don't know. And sometimes the easy way is like translate,
Mm-hmm.
but that's, it's not so easy to remember if someone just translates something. But if you have a context, it's easier to remember next time.
I agree with you, absolutely. At this very moment, just I have a student, and he was trying to enrich his vocabulary by memorizing words, and he was absolutely it was absolutely useless.
Mhm.
And I advised him just to learn these words into the context.
Good. In
And
context. In context.
in context,
Good.
right? And he said, yes, it's better. It's
Good. Uh-huh. Oh, that's really good. Good.
better.
It's definitely easier. Okay, what about number 6?
Provide more time for practice than presentation of language. Mm. And what presentation of language?
So we often refer to PPT. So that's a teaching technique. So it would be presentation, practice, testing.
Mhm.
So
Like keywords, for example, you introduce them, you
Mhm,
practice, you present them,
mhm.
you practice, and
Mhm.
then you test them.
Yes.
Mhm.
So the presentation would be the part where you're actually teaching them. And the practice is the part when they're doing the exercise.
Mhm. Okay, so and here provide more time for practice
Mhm.
than presentation of language. Um, but you should present it in appropriate way. So,
Yes. Uh-huh.
like,
I agree
so,
with you, but on the other hand, you will find that it's easier for students to switch off during presentation.
mhm.
So if you give a little bit more time for practice, you allow for error correction, and they're more likely to remember things if they're practicing themselves. So say that, for example, you're teaching the present simple and you have a student that does not remember that the third person singular needs an S. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you can sit there and tell them you need to have an S. You need to have an S for the third, in the present simple, you need to have an S. That's how we
Right.
do it. Okay.
Yes, we do this.
Yes. But then, because he doesn't practice enough, next time he's going to make the same mistake.
I see. So
Yes.
more practice for this kind of students, like
Hmm.
sometimes it is important for them to they learn the rule, they get the rule during the practice, during when they practice doing it,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
they get the rule.
Exactly.
I
Not so
see.
much when they're just listening and being
Mm-hmm.
passive. Okay,
Yeah.
good. And
Number
7?
7, help students with pronunciation by drilling.
Drilling.
And drilling, repeating once again.
Yes, good. Repetition, repetition after repetition.
Mm,
Hmm.
I don't even know because we do not pay so much time to pronunciation,
Hmm.
like
We
to
don't pay so much time on.
mm, to pay a lot of time on.
Well, you're confusing
That's some,
attention.
that's something new for me.
I think you're confusing attention and time. We pay attention
Right,
to,
right, right.
yes,
Oh, I
or
see.
spend time on.
Mm-hmm. All right. Spend more time on. Um,
But in your opinion, do you think constant repetition helps with pronunciation?
mm, I don't think that it helps much. Maybe listening helps more.
Very good. Exactly. Exactly. It's like I said to you before, listening before speaking
Again.
is always more important. Exactly. Very good. Very good. Okay, now
When my students do some mistakes when pronouncing a word,
do
I
do.
make mistakes.
Mhm.
Make mistakes. Um, thank you for correcting my
It's okay. No problem.
So when they make pronunciation mistakes, I just ask them to repeat the word again,
Hmm.
and that's it.
Yes, but you
Not,
can also I advise them to maybe listen to more things in English, like YouTube videos or, series, or just general listening is good for pronunciation.
And it's important, I think it is important when a student repeats the word after the teacher correctly.
Yes.
Like some students ignore my corrections.
Ah, okay.
So I ask to repeat, but they ignore, and
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, you could ask another student. So, because it's a little bit competitiveness. If another student can say it, you should be able to say it too. So, if you say, for example, the word accommodation, okay.
Mhm.
So you say to a student, it's accommodation, and they say accommodation, something.
Mhm.
I say, okay, Patricia, and she says it correctly. The other student is going to say, I need to say it correctly, okay?
Right.
A little bit competitive.
Competitive.
Competition, yes, competitiveness or competition is good.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
Now, 8 and 9, which one of these do you think is the correct one?
Are they similar? So explain the rules of grammar to students. Ask students to explain the rules of grammar to you. Mm. I like number 9.
And it depends on the level, okay? So if you have upper intermediate students, which one should you do?
9.
Exactly.
9.
Yes. Hmm.
Right.
Yes. So it's you can also write a sentence and ask them to look at the structure and explain, similar to what we said before, having the sentences on the board. Good. 10.
Analyze the target language you plan to teach. Analyze on my own or together
Yes.
with,
Yes.
just
Before the
before my
lesson.
class.
Yeah, by researching it.
Mhm. Analyze the target language you plan to teach. Mm, I think it also depends on the level of the students.
Hmm.
Um, like with upper intermediate, I don't always introduce new words.
Yes. Hmm.
Um,
I think this is more for yourself. Some teachers may need a little refresher, you know. So it what it means is make sure you know your language very well before you teach it. I don't think it applies to you, because I think and you do a lot of work and preparation and research. But in general, teachers should be very familiar with what they're going to introduce.
Um, is it the same with aims when you prepare for your
Yes,
lesson? Like you set your goals for each lesson,
that's right.
what
That's
you
exactly
are
it.
going to teach and what you are going to
So that's
introduce.
Yeah, that's the target language. Like you said, for example, in your lesson, you are practicing the use of modals for probability and deduction in the past. So you need to make sure that you know the differences and why they're used in that way.
So,
That's
by the way, there is a question. May I
Yes,
ask you a question?
of course.
Is there a difference between might have gone or may have gone? May and might, what is the difference?
Mm,
Students asked me.
yes,
And,
and it's a very good question.
or it might rain, it may rain. What is the difference? Might.
Very good question. Yeah, and it's the only difference is in terms of formality. It's more formal to use may. So, you would probably use it in writing. For example, if I'm speaking, I would say he might have.
Mhm.
I, I don't really say he may have unless I'm speaking to someone who's a little bit on a professional basis, if you like.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah, so might is spoken, informal.
yeah, might is less formal than may,
Mhm.
but there's no difference in the meaning.
I see. And absolute, apparently and obviously. These
Right.
adverbs, apparently and obviously, are they synonymous?
No, not at all. No. Apparently is almost like maybe. It seems like. It appears to be, but obviously is you are certain.
Mm.
So apparently, you think maybe, but obviously you are certain. Okay,
Thank you a lot.
no problem. Okay, 11.
Anticipate potential student difficulties. Um, anticipate potential student difficulties. Like anticipate to foresee.
Very good. So what kind of problems could they have? And you can anticipate normal kind of difficulties that typically Russian students have, like we discussed in one of our lessons, the typical mistakes they make. So that's what it means. So do you think it's important that you anticipate difficulties, problems?
It is important, but I don't think that we can anticipate all the
Oh, no.
difficulties that students may come across. But it really helps to to organize your work in a more effective way and to avoid some awkward situations like
Of course, you're right. And this is why they say potential. So it's not possible to anticipate everything, but,
Mhm.
the most common problems,
Right.
most common difficulties. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, the last one is an interesting one.
Sit down during feedback when possible.
hmm Why
Is
is that
it
important?
important
Ah,
to
that's
sit down during feedback?
hmm So let me ask you this.
Is it
Imagine
about the teacher? That
the
is about
teacher. Yes, definitely the teacher.
a teacher should sit down during feedback when possible.
Why? Imagine you're sitting down and someone is talking to you and they're standing up. Do you feel
Mhm.
comfortable?
Not very much.
Aha. So it's about the eye level. So when you're talking to your students, you're at the same level. You're not, you know.
Right.
hmm
So it is important to sit down.
Yes, yes, it makes them feel more comfortable because
Comfortable.
you're at the same level. But it's about feedback. It's not about the presentation. It's
Mhm.
about feedback. So when you're telling them that something's good, not so good, or correcting, it's more reassuring that you're not standing over them and kind of one thing I do in group work is if they're sitting down, I will kind of go down to their level as well.
Mhm.
It makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. It's just a little thing, but sometimes it makes a big difference.
Right. Such little things do make a difference.
They do make a difference.
Even the atmosphere in your classroom, whether it's warm, relaxing,
Yes,
and inviting.
very
So
good.